Care to introduce yourself?
Mm.
Who is Edwards, beside a prolific gamer and game designer?
Okay. Welcome. Hello.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank you
thank
for
you for
hosting us.
inviting me. And
It's a pleasure.
the answer to that is that, as you can hear from my English, I'm a native-born American, and
Yes.
I have moved to Sweden exactly 3 years ago. Um,
Oh, great.
this is a permanent move. I am now a permanent resident in Sweden, and I own property here and a business here, and I am looking at the eligibility for citizenship. And I haven't
Excellent.
broken any laws or anything, so I'm, you know,
That's a
have
nice start.
have my driver's license and everything here, so I'm
Yeah.
well on the road toward that end. And so that's my current situation. For those of you who are interested, I was born and grew up in California, but I have spent considerable time in other parts of the states as well. So those are some things to just know about me nationally,
Yeah.
and also that I was a biologist. That was my
Yes.
degree. I was a specialist in evolutionary biology, and I was a professor in the university for 14 years. So, 25-year career in that particular field.
Yeah.
And I also wrote a book, evolution book.
Oh, great.
And so um, there's quite a bit of there's quite a bit of background and issues, stories, and topics and everything in relationship to that. Um, a few other interesting cultural details. I was born in the early 1960s and had a considerably colorful upbringing on the coast of California, with lots and lots
Okay.
of crisscrossing political events and people and situations. So effectively, I'm sort of interesting,
Yeah,
I
we
guess.
we think
Yeah.
we think so. You actually have already touched on some of the further questions that I have.
Well, tell me about
Uh,
those questions, and we'll go into that area.
okay, great. So, Kostis is asking about your move to Sweden, and how different it is from living to the States.
Well, I
Of
have actually a feature that I do on YouTube. I only began it a little bit ago, but every Friday I get on screen and do a live YouTube, you know, um, kind of, I guess it's kind of pathetic. Here, I'm going to go and like socialize with the world out through YouTube sort of thing, but it's kind of fun.
that sounds
And,
fun.
and, and every so it's about different things. It's just whatever I feel like talking about. But a
Yeah,
lot of it often is comparative or experiential about living
yeah,
here. Now, the most profound thing to say, and I think you'll understand some of that political background I was talking about when I say that, people talk a lot right now about incipient fascism and failed state and a few other things in regard to the United States.
yes,
Allow me to inform you that they are 40 years too late. And I'm well aware of this and have been well aware of this from an early age. And it's, however, talking about it is like talking into a dead microphone. So
yes,
effectively, any opinion I've had about the society I was living in was, you know, in, inaudible. And so I find it doubly inaudible now because the gaudy aspects, the colorful aspects of these things right now in the States have captured everyone's attention. And I find myself saying, well, you're just talking about what particular flashy details of the phenomenon are at work here. And so, therefore, coming from a culture that I have those opinions about, that analysis of, to one where I don't,
yes,
is rather extraordinary. I'm not sure I can even explain. I mean, you live in Greece. I have followed political and economic issues regarding Greece, as well as Italy, as well as Ireland,
that's
for
nice to
some
know.
time.
That's nice to know.
Yeah, and I am well aware of what privatization has done That this is not about how those Greeks can't handle their money and overspend and are, I'm sure you have put up with enough bullshit of this kind.
I have, and what I have to say about this is that it's always very easy to blame it on the poor guy.
Precisely. And so
Yeah,
it's also well worth talking about what actually defines poor in this regard. And
it does.
so I was, I'm saying all this because Sweden has an interesting relationship with the European Union. In many ways, Sweden is a very powerful country. Swedes all have they all have inferiority complex. Okay, so
Do
everybody,
they?
yeah, everyone in well, no, not in some ways, very definitely not, but in the way I'm talking about, which is this notion that we are just a little weak country, and we're saying, wait a minute, Sweden like does whatever it wants always. Nobody pushes Sweden around. The U.S. can't push it around. The back in the Soviet days, the USSR couldn't push it around, and in many ways, it's because it kind of bent whichever way the wind was blowing. But on the other hand, when the European Union was formed, Sweden said, "Yeah, okay, but screw your money." And we'll be in this union thing of yours, but as really nothing. We're not going to owe you anything.
Yeah.
And so instantly, and they still use the kronor. They don't use the euro.
Yes. Yes.
And it's interesting. Imagine belonging to the EU but not financially.
Fiscal independence is something that is very important for any sovereign state,
Sure.
I think.
Well, that's precisely. No, this is kind of funny. Tell me if you agree with this. Um,
Sure.
After I published my game called Spione, which is set in Berlin, after I published that, I had come to some conclusions
Hmm.
about the nature of the economics of Europe
Yeah.
when I was writing, which was about 15 years ago. And I was thinking about what I had learned about the Deutschmark of the
Hmm.
former West Germany, which was
Yes.
backed by the dollar. Was it could not fail. It could not fall in value because it was
Yeah.
backed by global and international and American backed banks. And so the Westmark, as the Westmark as it was sometimes called, but the Deutschmark was like a gold bar, basically the closest thing in the
Indeed.
world to a gold bar. And and even that doesn't really make sense because we know gold isn't what everyone says. But you see what I mean. But the point is that I used to joke that after the collapse of the Soviet Union and after the reconfigurations in Europe, that the West Germans said, "Wait a minute, we miss our Deutschmark. We used to be king of the world because we had the Deutschmark.
Yeah.
Well, we'll want it back. We'll go ahead and like play fair with everybody as long as it's our fair."
Yeah.
And that's kind of
What
what the
the
euro
European
is,
Union?
right? It's kind of the return of the Deutschmark in many ways.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Now it's called the euro.
yeah, exactly. Right. But I kind of look at what happened before and after. I'm like, that looks kind of similar. You know,
Yeah.
they say so we won't have any more currency, exchange currency differences. And I'm like, the euro is about nothing but currency differences.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have to say, therefore, when I'm in Sweden, in what is a very successful state, with the kind of healthcare that Americans know nothing about, nothing.
Yeah.
I mean,
They call it socialism.
well, they do.
Yeah.
Although, as you know, I mean, Sweden is, if we're going to get technical, it's a social democracy.
Yeah.
But yes, from American standpoint, it might as well be raving red
It's
communism.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They
Um,
could be. It could be Vietnam for the American
right, right. And so it's fascinating
public.
to be here. But as I have pointed out in some of my Friday features, there's a weird romance with personal profit as success, even though wealth inequality is very, very even here in Sweden. The most affluent people are really not much more wealthy than the poorest people in global
Uh
terms.
huh.
It's
Yeah.
not in global terms. The wealth is very, very equal. And so
Mhm.
the the point is, there even so, the notion of sort of personal successful capital in Sweden is considered a great virtue. It's very Protestant, right? The Lutheran
Yes.
tradition. The notion that you have sort of achieved happiness and actualized yourself
Yes.
by through your
Yes. You are rich.
successful
God
business.
favors you.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it kind of, there is that unspoken cultural assumption is still there. So you have this incredibly powerful social democracy with remarkable support for everything, unbelievable support for everything. And yet you also have this kind of rosy, the happiest version of Reagan, in the head.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of an interesting contradiction. I guess you can afford to have that beautiful vision in your head if you're living in a social democracy. So,
Yeah.
um,
We're going to touch on politics again, I think,
sure.
on
But yes, I figure you guys want to talk about games sooner or later, right?
uh, they might. I am also interested in touching politics.
Okay. Oh no, I got you started. Look what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's wait until I get to the question about Sahida, your Italian role playing game.
Do you want to do
Okay,
that now?
I have organized the questions
Okay.
that we start with some personal questions, and then
Sure.
we continue with you as a gamer, and then with
Okay.
your as a designer, and then with the GNS. But
All in
we
one
can
interview? Are you okay? Okay.
well we can do a second and a third if you want.
It sounds like you've
There is
got three or
there
four
is no need
already
for,
baked in.
yeah,
Let's go.
there is no need for us to get exhausted.
Any other personal questions to embarrass myself
Yeah,
later?
yeah. Uh, so you're a very important person in the RPG scene. Uh, what do you think is your greatest contribution to it? How do you think that people will remember you in like 30 years? I hope that the hobby is alive and well in 30 years.
Well, that's a difficult question to ask of a person. In some
I
ways,
know, that's why I'm
in
asking you.
some words, I'm the worst person to ask. And I don't know how this will make me sound, but I have a kind of aversive reaction to a question like that, which is, you know, who the fuck cares? But that's just, I'll try to be positive and see what how I can answer that in a generous way. It is, um, I can tell you what I hope, and whether I'm given credit for it is not the point. I
Yeah,
would like it, of course. I would like it to reflect on me in a successful way while I'm still alive, but
yeah,
that's just a hope.
makes
It's a
sense.
big surprise.
It makes
But
sense.
even if, but putting that aside, the variables that interest me the most are that as a very personally creative activity, that pride and respect for doing your work, for making your own game, and being able to promote it in that fashion. Um, I would like that to persist. I would like it to be part of the activity. Now, there's a dark side to it, which is the idea of saying, well, a designer is kind of an elevated and an elevated special gamer, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that you don't have to give up your work to another person for it to be legitimized.
I know. This is the
That's
story.
what I'm after. That if you do creative work, I mean, well, all role playing is creative activity, but if you have this strange problem, like I have, and wants to make your own role playing designs, that you actually have the ability to say how it's going to get out there to the world. You don't have a standard method. The kind of ideal that there's an industry and this is how you break into the industry and this is the degree you have to have and here are the employers that you can approach and all that sort of thing is the worst thing.
Yeah, I
And so
agree. I agree.
yeah, so the idea that you are not really publishing, something unless you go to someone like that was very common for a long time. And I
Yes.
think I've contributed to breaking that. Some people
You
say I had
have.
nothing to do with it, the internet would have done it anyway. I'm not so sure about that. And so it,
I think at the very least you made it happen faster.
one can hope. So my hope,
Yes.
therefore, is that it doesn't get destroyed because it's a vulnerable achievement. And it is, there are plenty of things going on which are, if not in a conspiratorial way, but in a truly structural way, will destroy it. And so, these are hard won battles, hard won
Indeed.
events. So that's one thing.